want to offer my great appreciation to our friends and the leaders at the Michigan IPN, Tony Cho, John Geis, Stephen Garcia, and others. And I hope my new friend and colleague, Stephen Susser, is out there somewhere. And at the Atlanta IPN, great thanks to Becky Lee, Nicole Morris, Matt Warrenzak for putting it together, as well as this pupillage group leadership, Jennifer Miller, Ben Schlesinger, and apologies to anyone I've overlooked. So many thanks to all, and now on to some learning and visiting. Thank you. Matt, hit that record, wherever you are.
Thanks, Kevin. At this point, I'd like to turn the leadership of this panel over to John. John, take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Matt, for having us. Thank you all to the Atlanta Inn for having us. It's good to be here. It's the breakout sessions were really nice. I love seeing all of your smiling faces. However, this panel will probably go better if everybody shuts off their video, except for, let's see how this is going to work. See if the people shuffle to the top. Yep, looks like our whole panel is here. So I will briefly going counterclockwise on my screen. So Angela Caligiuri, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Angela Caligiuri. I am counsel at General Motors, working with intellectual property matters.
Then we have, so this is going to be an interesting one. So Antun, Peakovic, and I have known each other at many meetings before. And before this meeting, I sent out an email to everybody, hey, just make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I sent Antun an email, and he responds by changing my phonetic spelling of his name. He just takes all the capitalization out and sends it back. So I don't know if I've been calling him the wrong name for the last 6 years or not, but I think he's just messing with me. I think you're unmuted, sir.
I was just messing with you.
So where are you at, Antun? Please introduce yourself.
I'm a director of IP for Schaeffler in Detroit area. They're a German-based global company supplier for the automotive and industrial and aerospace industries.
And then last but not least is Nakul Warrior. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nakul Warrior, Assistant General Counsel at Ricoh USA. Ricoh USA is an office technology and service provider. I handle all of our commercial antitrust IP litigation, and then I'm also responsible for our antitrust and a couple of other compliance programs.
So thank you. And one of the big questions that happens, and I'm just going to try and randomly start with people so I don't keep going in the same cycle here. Antun, how did you end up in house? I presume you started at a law firm like most people, and somehow you had a career and got in house. What's your story?
Well, I actually started in engineering, and then did law school kind of in conjunction with engineering. And then Schaeffler actually decided I was an engineer at Schaeffler. They wanted me to come in-house directly. So they put me up for a year with a law firm and ended up going in-house directly.
Nakul, your thought, your story?
Yeah, mine's a little different in the sense that, but not, I think, unique in the sense that I had, when I was at a law firm, Blank Rome in Philadelphia, one of our clients was a predecessor entity for Ricoh USA. They were called Icon Office Solutions. And I probably did work for that client for 5 or 6 years, got to know their litigation team pretty well, got to know their transactional team pretty well. So when there was kind of an opportunity that popped up, I had someone reach out to me and see if I was interested, which I was. Took me a little bit of time to figure out whether I wanted to move from the big firm to to in-house, but it seemed like all the in-house folks had weekends themselves, which wasn't exactly the situation I was in. So I thought that would be kind of an interesting, change. But there were a lot of other things that kind of compelled that decision, including the kind of work that I would be doing, the variety of work that I'd be doing, and not necessarily solely litigation work. So I made the decision to go in-house, and then shortly thereafter, Icon, which was the company I went in-house to, got bought by Ricoh.
Angela, I know you have an interesting story. Yours is sort of a little bit of reverse of everybody else's.
Right, I'm a little bit winding. I think I worked for 9 years in automotive as an engineer on the supply side for General Motors, actually. And then I decided to go to law school. And so I continued working. I went to law school at night. And after I started, I met with some people from my firm, and they brought me in right away. So I was working full-time at a law firm as a clerk during law school, which I did in the evening. And then after I graduated, I worked for the firm for a few years longer. And then I decided to go to one of the satellite offices of the patent office that opened. So I was one of the first examiners in the Detroit satellite office. And I did that for 3 years while because I had a young family. So I thought it would be a little bit more family friendly. But I ran into someone who I knew from the firm that I had worked at that had switched over to General Motors, and they were building out the GM team at the time. They wanted to do in-house prosecution. So they were bringing attorneys on staff for in-house prosecution work. And so I came on staff to do that, although right from the beginning, I didn't really stick with that much. So there were too many interesting things to try. So I've been there for 5 years, and now I manage the design patent portfolio for General Motors, and I work with brand protection matters.
Thank you. I realized I didn't say who I was. So people are wondering who the Santa Claus is. This is what Santa Claus does, not during December. So I'm John Geis. I am Assistant General Counsel at American Axle. Yes, we make axles. We make axles, drive shafts, differentials. We make connecting rods, forgings, all sorts of good stuff for the auto industry. And to answer my own question, I started out as an engineer, went back to law school, went to Foley and Lardner in Milwaukee, and it ended up that the American Axle was asking counsel at Foley's Detroit office if they knew anybody. So they started asking, spread the net around. It got out to the Milwaukee office. And when the email that went out said, do you know anybody who'd be interested in this job? 4 other associates forwarded that email and said, it's in the auto industry, it's in Detroit, it's in-house. Why don't you have that job yet? I don't know if they were trying to clear their path to partnership, but it ended up being a good job for me. So here I am today. Starting with Nakul, what is your in-house legal department? I mean, size, what's sort of the structure of the legal department? I know they're all different. So how is yours structured?
Yeah, so I'm at Ricoh USA. So we have obviously different geographic teams. And so the Ricoh USA department, we have kind of our litigation function, which is kind of where I sit. But that includes, some employment litigation as well. But even though I don't do that, that function's kind of where that resides. We have a kind of a corporate and transactional team. So they're responsible for day-to-day inbound corporate, or I should say commercial transactions, vendor agreements. And they're also responsible for strategic transactions, acquisition, sales, so on and so forth. And then we did have a compliance department, but we've now kind of decentralized that a little bit, such that there are a few folks in the department that have compliance functions, but not necessarily a centralized kind of point person. And then in the legal department itself, we also have risk, which would largely just be considered insurance, that comes under the umbrella of legal, as does physical and cybersecurity. So overall, the amount of lawyers in the department is actually quite small. We probably have about 10 or 12 lawyers total across the country, but the department is big because of some of the other functional units that are there, such as security, cybersecurity, risk, and some level of compliance. And that's just the US. So then our parent company has a legal team in Tokyo, and then we have a separate legal team in Europe and in South America, which we work with on a pretty regular basis, but they just don't necessarily flow into the same reporting structure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have a fairly large department. Ours is sort of the opposite end. I mean, you said 10 people. We're at 7 people, but we're 7 people globally for a $6 billion company. So it's we run pretty lean. I think sometimes we could use a few more people, but it for those of you on the who are outside counsel, it's pretty interesting being having to handle whatever lands on your desk, right? There's only so many people in the department. So somebody one day confused intellectual property and real property. And so now I'm responsible for IP and real estate. So I got that. And then, commercial terms, whatever happens lands on my desk. That's the benefits of the small department, but it's also some of the frustrations too. Angela, I think you're in a kinda large department, maybe.
I was laughing. I was thinking, gosh, we're really small. We have 18 on just the IP group, just the IP side. So yeah, I think we're closer to 100 globally. But we've got our general counsel, then our legal leadership team, and then each of the groups are separate. We have our chief IP counsel, and then each group has a lead counsel that handles matters management, and then counsel is everyone else as of right now. So it's everyone from new with experience to lots and lots of years of experience can be counsel. So it's hard to differentiate who knows what sometimes because of just based on title, but it is what it is. So and we get the same thing. We have an online service that you can go in and search for people. And so people do the same thing. You'll get an email and they'll be asking you a question that just seems so off the wall, asking about bankruptcy or something. And I don't really work with that frequently. So you've got to figure out who to direct them to. And sometimes with such a large team, it's interesting for me as well.
Antun, you're different size then too?
Yep. The Schaeffler is again a global company. Globally, we have about 50 IP people. That's including paralegals and patent agents and patent attorneys and so on. In the US, we have 7. So that's 5 patent attorneys / patent agents, including myself. I include myself in that number. Probably shouldn't, but I do. And 2 paralegals. So basically what we handle is everything IP related, agreements and litigation and prosecution and trademarks and brand protection and all everything permutations in between. What's nice about it though, even though we're relatively small, same size as you, John, in the Americas, we have this global structure that's pretty relatively large. So, and that's split between, there's a group in the main headquarters in Germany, there's a smaller group in China, and our regions are split this way, but there's Asia Pacific as well. So, but we handle pretty much, I think it's now 70% of prosecution in-house, something like that with that team. And we have a lot of applications. I think we're number 2 in Germany for filing or something. So quite a few applications are handled in-house.
Yeah, I will say one of the benefits of being in-house is not have to draft applications. I liked office actions. I didn't like the drafting applications. And it is, I will say one of the benefits is that on Friday afternoon, when everything is hitting the fan and I want to go home for the weekend, I have picked up the phone and I've called outside counsel and I said, I'm sorry for this, but this application has to be filed on Monday. Good luck. And that's why they get paid the big bucks, right? So I'm sort of shifting gears now, getting into more of the substantive questions. And as I'm doing that, if anybody has looked down at the chat column, if anybody has a question out there, wants to send me a what is it, IM, DM, whatever you kids call it these days. Tell me what, I got my screen open on the side, so if anybody wants to message me with questions, feel free to do that. The kind of two topics du jour that we will be covering next are in a little separate order are COVID and then diversity and inclusion. With COVID, at least for our company, we are sort of an older school company who wants to get back into the office. They do not let, their working from home has been working fine, but they just want to get everybody back in the office. So we're currently scheduled to go back July 19th. Seems to be every 3 months we move it back. But this one might actually stick. So, and there were discussions about what that's going to look like. Is it going to be on rotating teams? Is it going to be, is it going to be rotating teams? Is it going to be some people stay home, some people go into the office? What, Angela, because I might actually know the answer to this. What is GM looking like for going back into the office with COVID?
We're not. So that's how it's looking. We received notification that they were going to evaluate in September, but just in the last couple of days, we received information talking about a new program. It's called Work Appropriately, and it really is decide between you and your team what is best for you. If you need to be in the office, that's fine, but they're going to be giving us opportunities to work from home more so than before, like laptops to those people that didn't have them. For our team, legal staff team, it is right now it is set for January, a decision to be made in January. So I spoke to my manager directly, and we're talking about maybe meeting at the library, since we work downtown, but we both live in the same city. So we're like, well, let's just meet at the library instead. Why drive downtown for just us to get together once a week? So that's kind of where we're at. It's what's best for you and your working conditions. If you need to meet with your client, meet with them. Otherwise, don't come in. So I think that's it seems to be the move for the future for us, is to not actually be in office.
Nakul, are things different down south? And Michigan's pretty much a COVID hotspot right now. Are things better down there? Are you going back into the office anytime soon?
No, so we have a similar policy in place where, if you're in a corporate function, you're not going back to the office unless you absolutely have to. Now, our sales folks, can go back in the office to facilitate a sales function or to meet a client, but your traditional corporate functions, legal, HR, finance, so on and so forth, are not going back into the office, which is kind of interesting because a month before COVID started, there was essentially a policy that was put out there that basically said, if you are within 50 miles of an office, you have to go into the office. So there was a big movement for everyone in the company to work out of an office. We're talking February of 2020. That's gone, 180 degrees to where now no one's going into the office, obviously because of the pandemic. But I think the policy that's going to come out of that is that you can work remotely or you can do a hybrid work arrangement. It hasn't really been fully thought out yet, but as of now, there's no plan for anyone to even consider going back to the office until the end of the summer.
Antun, you can answer that question, or I will also tee up the next question. Sure. Which is how has COVID and working from home been affecting department productivity? You think it's up, down, sideways?
I'll answer both. The first one's easy. We're kind of in between the two, what you guys were saying. So we're supposed to go 100% back to the office in July. And then just within the last week, there's supposed to be some sort of work from home policy. So from my perspective, to answer the second question, in addition to whether we're working from home or going back to the office, it's been working fine for us. In fact, one of the things that we've always done, or I've always done in the Americas department, is keep enough work in-house for the in-house attorneys to be effective, meaning that they're knowledgeable, that they can draft applications, they can do office actions, and keep enough outside that we can don't have to have a bunch of in-house staff, basically. with the idea that if any situation happens like last year, that we can pull more work in-house, which is exactly what we did. So we went from something like 50% in-house to about 70% of the work in-house. And the team really stepped up. So I think working from home, especially in our function, like in IP itself, especially for people that do prosecution, it was much more efficient working from home, getting rid of the commute, interruptions by various people during the day made it a lot more efficient to do just regular prosecution. It made my job a little bit harder because I have a lot more interactions with managers and all that. So my days have been just full of meetings. It's like this explosion of meetings. It's quite annoying, actually. But generally, I would say it's better, and we've done a lot more work in-house for the same amount of people, same amount of staff. So it's actually worked out, I think, better working from home for the last year.
Angela and Nakul, are you guys seeing productivity going up, going down, sideways?
Yeah, so for me, I think, I don't know about productivity. I feel like I'm working, earlier than I used to when I was going into the office, and then later, only because there's really no natural kind of end to your workday. So now with Teams and email, and people understand that you're not going into the office. They understand they're not going to see you face to face. They can't catch you by the water cooler, so to speak. So they get you on Teams or they get you on email, and then there's this kind of, almost obligation to respond or entertain that dialogue. So I've had to put some natural limits on that. In terms of productivity, I would say we've probably been working harder because there's just been a lot more activity. And it's kind of counterintuitive. As I mentioned in my intro, we're an office technology company. So you don't need to do a lot of sophisticated math to understand that our business was hit pretty hard, especially in the first couple of months of COVID. But it brought up all kinds of issues that we just didn't have to really think about from a legal perspective. Force majeure, which obviously now is a topic that everybody had to deal with at some point. But COVID-related issues, unemployment, and so on and so forth, that just made the legal department much busier. So going to your point earlier, John, I was kind of nicely tucked into a litigation function. I would weigh in on some IP issues on the transactional side. I would handle some transactions from time to time, but my role was pretty well defined. And now I feel like it's, hey, if there's a problem, we need a resource, someone call Nakul or someone call X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't matter necessarily whether I've got some expertise on that. They just need someone to handle the issue. So it's been a little bit more, it's been interesting, but it's been a little bit more sporadic as well in terms of the kinds of work that I'm doing. More varied, certainly, but it can be a lot more stressful as well.
So I feel that the workload has gone up. I agree with Nakul that it's been a lot earlier, a lot later, a lot more intertwined in my normal life. I mentioned before that I worked at the patent office. So working at the patent office, I worked from home full time. So I think I was a little more prepared than most for this. I mean, I knew not to wear stretchy pants every day because I knew that would lead to bad things. But no, I mean, I think I know how to handle it working from home a little bit better and put controls in place to keep things a little bit more separate. But I noticed that I'm getting emails that come in very, very late at night from people that would normally be done at the, the end of their workday. So because of those people interacting more frequently, you tend to interact more frequently as well, and at different times than normal. You're checking your email constantly. You have your phone with you almost all the time. So I think work product, there's been more. There's just been more. There's been more because of all the things that COVID has brought, budget changes, and how does that affect things? How do you delay things? How do you add things in and ramp them back up once they do restart? So that's been a little bit different. We've also had attrition that was unexpected and no backfill. So that moving that work around to accommodate those people that have gone to different groups, and other things that have come up. It seems like everyone wants to sue everyone right now. So we've been dealing with a lot more of that type of matter than we had been previously. So it seems that it's been a huge ramp up for me. A lot more work, a lot more things going on, and a lot longer of a work day for me personally.
Yeah, I know from personally, it's the workload ramped up, and I think as people have pointed out, it's working in global organizations. It used to be understood that that the U.S. offices work from 7 to 5, 8 to 6, something like that, and then there were off hours. But it got to for me, it got to a head. Usually, we ramp up here in the fourth quarter. January kind of comes back down, but then it was going into February and into March, where it was craziness, because you wake up in the morning, you're in the office, you're answering emails from Asia, and then Europe, from Europe, and then you deal with the US things, and then you have dinner when the kids get home, and then you pick up, you log back on because it's only 5 steps away. And when you're on, you're suddenly green on Teams and Skype. And so if I'm working at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, the guys in China see that my light's green and my phone starts ringing. And it just, I realized there was no sleep. On the upside, if you get a hold of me between about 3:30 and 4:15 on any given day, my kids are practicing piano. So you can actually hear the piano playing in the background, and they're actually getting pretty decent. So, there are upsides. There's a question came through here. I'm going to answer it for, I think I know the answer. I'm going to answer it, and then you guys can let me know if it's different. The question is, if for return to work, are employers requiring vaccinations? And we had that conversation today, actually, in our department meeting. And the answer is we don't know. We're not really sure what July is going to look like. Coincidentally, I think with 7 people in the department, at least 6 of us I know are vaccinated. So it's sort of moot on our part, but I think it's going to be hard it'll be interesting to see how that sorts itself out as far as requiring vaccinations go back in the office. I don't know if any of you have a different answer than that.
They're not requiring vaccinations on our end, but they are giving some incentive for people, like a health incentive, basically to get vaccinated, but it isn't a requirement.
Yeah, I don't think I know there's a couple of work streams that we've got internally where legal's involved. I have not been involved, thankfully. That's a morass that I don't know that I want to get involved in, but I probably will get dragged into some form or another. I think the thinking right now is that they're looking at the issue, obviously, because we are in 50 different states in the country. Not every state is going to have the same laws in terms of employment law, so on and so forth. It's, we got to look at federal guidance. We haven't made any decisions yet, but I think it will be more along the lines of an incentive rather than a mandatory, having it be mandatory. So that's, I think, where the thinking is right now, but it's evolving as we speak.
We've had no mandatory requirement yet, but it has been encouraged.
Yeah, I can't say that it's been required. We actually, being in the city of Detroit, were able to, qualified early to get vaccines through the city. We were actually able to set up a clinic, a drive-through clinic at our Detroit campus. So, just had to show up and, sort of skip the line and get the employees. So at some point in time, if you can't show up for free, at the office, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So there's another question here, and I'm going to combine 2 questions together. One is, how are we seeing, what sort of innovations have you used, anything other than Teams and Skype and more online? How has that affected your day-to-day work? And sort of mixing that question with the question here is, what things would you want to continue in the post-pandemic environment, and what things do you want to get back to sooner than later? So I'll let Angela choose any one of that morass of questions to or just ask yourself the question you want to answer and answer that one.
I think we have used, I have used every single mode out there. I've been on Zoom, I've been on Blue Jeans, I've been on Skype. We had Teams. I think there have been at least a couple more in there too. We've had to do that for litigation because we've done our depositions through Zoom and some of those online platforms. It's been very interesting. It's been very awful. There's so much confusion when people are talking, but Teams seems to be the one that everyone is gravitating towards, and it seems to be working well. The only concern I have right now is as we're moving towards Teams for GM and moving away from Skype, we use Skype for IMing our coworkers and catching them and calling them, and it is not saved. It is not something that is kept. So a lot of people post things back and forth to each other without any fear of it being used later. But our Teams, we've been informed that if you're on a litigation hold, any person who is on a litigation hold, the entire Teams chat stream will be saved. And so now no one intends to use it because that's a concern that every single thing that is shared, because on legal staff, we're pretty much always on a litigation hold of some sort. So it's a concern that I have, and that's something that I'm nervous about moving forward. I think that answers your question.
Just a piece of legal advice. I'm in-house counsel. I don't represent you. I'm not your lawyer, but you should always assume that anything you put on corporate communications, the company is monitoring, watching, and will use against you if it is in their best interest.
I don't put anything out there that I don't intend to be seen, but I know other people do, and that is a concern that I'm worried for them. Let's put it that way.
So Antun, what do you, technology, good things, bad things, what do you want to get back to? You want to be back in the office? Do you want to get
I don't want to be back in the office. Honestly, I could see being back in the office part-time. So 2-3 days a week. I had a 2.5-hour commute or something, a day. So I'd be happy to work from home going forward, at least a portion of the week. One thing I do miss is in-person meetings. I think as nice as it is to do virtual networking and so on, there is something to be said for just taking the time to sit with someone or sit with a group of people. I say that in particular, well, for my team, that's one, because you kind of lose contact with your team a little bit. I mean, I set up calls and all that, but it's just not the same. You don't get that feel for it. And especially for the international departments, I do 2 or 3 trips to our various departments globally. And that's just a big black wall right now. It's just, there's nothing there because they're at a different time zone, especially our Chinese colleagues. They're just, it's difficult, as you say. The only times the day has extended. So I do have calls at 6 a.m. or at 10 p.m. To cover that. So that's what I like to go back to, maybe some of those visits. As far as technology, it's interesting the difference between the regions, because in the US, we were already pretty much paperless over the last 3-4 years. There wasn't really a lot of paper getting pushed back and forth. So we had all our systems set up already for this, meaning we have a global docket system, but we were using it more intensely than our global team was, or global teams were. And we have teams and shared drives and all that stuff. So as far as technology goes and transfer of documents, it was transparent for us. We had the processes in place, but I know in particular in Germany, it was a little bit painful because they were dealing with paper files a lot, even on litigation matters. They were passing paper files back and forth, and I think it was a bit of an adjustment for them. What was the other question? I think that's it, right? Yeah. And as far as teams, I think everyone's in the same boat as far as teams meetings and that. As I mentioned, the day does extend, and then everyone and their brother wants to book a meeting because you can't just stop by your office, or maybe they think they have to. I have no idea. I just know my day. Like today, I had a half an hour to myself, basically. So I don't know when I'm getting actual work done, which the answer is usually like 9 p.m., 9 to 11 p.m., something like you, John. So that's a bit annoying.
Yeah, I'll let Nakul answer that question, but to touch one point there, one of the big surprises in last year's panel when we had this that came up, I think a lot of outside counsel are surprised. They think inside counsel control their schedules, and inside counsel has zero control over their schedule. I start my week with wide open. I think I'm gonna get everything done. And by Tuesday morning, I am booked solid for the rest of the week. So if you're on outside counsel, don't assume that we have any control over our own schedules.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point, because I know we've hired people from outside counsel that come in-house and they're like, what the hell are all these meetings? Like, why do we have so many meetings? And I don't know. It just happens.
8 a.m. attend another meeting. That's our motto.
Yeah.
You guys got to learn the value of the calendar block, the whole.
Oh, yeah, I've done that for sure.
Now, I will tell you that was effective for about 3 weeks, and then
people ignore that. Yeah.
People just ignore it. So,
yeah.
But in terms of technology from my end, John, I mean, it's more of the same. We Teams, Zoom, you name it, from a communications standpoint. And we've done, I've done settlement conferences, Markmans, arbitrations, mediations, a pretty normal litigator's life through Zoom or through Teams. And, obviously it's different. It's different in a lot of ways, but it hasn't been ineffective. So I've been actually kind of pleasantly surprised by that. We started using Slack a little bit, which I still have no idea how the hell we use that, but it's apparently a tool that's available to us. And so there are some tools that I think we've been able to incorporate that we just didn't use very effectively before. And it'll be interesting to see a year and a half from now how that kind of translates into, what our life looks like then. Going back to the office front, I actually do work remotely. I'm here in Atlanta. My company, the US headquarters, is based just outside of Philadelphia. But the difference really for me has been that, usually my job involves a decent amount of traveling, whether for depositions or hearings or investigative things. And then there's the occasional, once a quarter kind of boondoggle to the home office. And so I miss a little bit of that. That was, to a certain extent, a part of my work life that I enjoyed, which I obviously don't do now. We've got a travel ban, and we do most of this through, the tools that I had mentioned. So I'm somewhat hopeful that we go back to some level of in-person either meetings or depositions, which I think we'll do. Just because, quite honestly, it gives me an opportunity to get out of my house. But we'll ultimately see. I think the verdict is out on how quickly that comes back.
So we're going to start shifting gears a little bit here, and this is going to be a bit of a segue question. It used to be, if outside counsel wanted to talk to us, they could meet us at a seminar, give us a call, take us out to lunch. Not that we can do lunches, because lunches are, taking a thing of value, the whatnot. But how in the days of COVID if you're an outside counsel, how do you actually, get that foot in the door to pitch business while you are, when everything's on Zoom and Skype and that sort of a thing?
Well, I guess where there's a will, there's a way. So I haven't seen any necessarily any kind of reduction in those types of efforts. It obviously happens, sometimes you get some Zoom requests, or you get a Teams request, or you get some emails and a phone conversation. So, I think obviously it helps to have an in-person meeting. I think that just is beneficial both in the in-house counsel and the outside counsel, just in terms of establishing that relationship. But it hasn't gone away, at least in my view. It really hasn't changed, I have to say, too much the relationship I have with existing counsel. Obviously someone that you've already got an existing relationship with, you're now having those conversations over other media, the phone, you're not meeting in person. But even that started to change a little bit, at least down here in Georgia, and where you can meet outside at a restaurant for a drink or something like that. But it's definitely changed from that perspective, but I haven't necessarily seen a huge diminishment in kind of outreach efforts. But that could just be unique to me. I'm not sure what Angela and Antun think?
What I've found is, it's been interesting. The cold calling has been a little different. A lot of times now, if I'm on a seminar or something on Zoom, people will take the list of participants and reach out to them either via LinkedIn or straight up email. So I will get contacts that way that I hadn't gotten before from that interaction. But again, the people that I've worked with directly are reaching out, they're calling, they're sending emails. It's the same type of thing for me for the most part that I had in the past, but for that seminar contact, the cold call that way.
I think people kind of went in a bit of a wave for existing outside counsel. I think it sort of dropped. There was that initial 2-3 months where they're really trying hard to set up Skype meetings or Zoom meetings or whatever and trying to keep contact with you. I think everyone was concerned the first couple months of the pandemic, and then it sort of dropped off. From my view, it just kind of, everyone went off into their own little spaces and did their own thing, and now it seems to be coming back again. So the wave is coming back where maybe life is getting somewhat back to normal. I don't know. As far as new outside counsel, I think it's very difficult for a new outside counsel to get their foot in the door with in-house. I get so many solicitations from various services, domestic and foreign, that again, with the amount of meetings and work I have, I'm not really willing to entertain new outside counsel, even good ones, even ones that maybe before I would have maybe thrown a bone to or had a presentation or some discussion with. It just not really the forum for it anymore. So again, where that often happened, where I met new outside counsel or we had discussions, was during panel discussions, association meetings, seminars, things like that, where you have discussions with them on the side, you hear some interesting points from them, where they hear you discuss something. And that's where these relationships, old school type of relationships started, the typical networking. Now, I don't know what to do. Honestly, I don't know. I can't give any advice. It seems like there needs to be a new, hate to say it this way, but new paradigm of how outside counsel meets in-house counsel and how they present themselves, because it's not going to be simple for the next year or so, especially if we keep on working from home.
Yeah, it is. I don't know that I have a good answer either. I feel like I've been flooded with cold calls a lot lately, and just tying back to the increased workload, the extended hours, taking cold calls is not high on my list. So we'll see how it goes. Carrying on that thought with outside counsel, is what sort of diversity inclusion requirements does the team look for in hiring outside counsel? And I know, are there policies in place? Are there I'll go ahead and answer this one first. It's sort of interesting in that we don't really have a policy on how we hire outside counsel. We're looking just for the best counsel possible. But it's been interesting because our head of litigation, Jen, definitely when we sit down to go through counsel, she is very aware of making sure, as a woman, to make sure that women are included in the list. I wouldn't necessarily, I would sit down and do a Google search, and I'm like, oh, I need a patent attorney who specializes in this, and then whoever comes up to the top of the list. And she just does it differently, where, okay, we can agree on these are the firms that we would be interested in, and then she's reading through all the different bios to see if there's somebody that resonates with her. So while there isn't necessarily a diversity policy, I think having a somewhat diverse legal department then leads to including more a broader set of outside counsel. I guess everybody's, it's the old saying, everybody's looking for somebody who looks like them. So the more people we have in the department who look like more people, the more people we have. hopefully I did not stick my foot in my mouth with that statement. Please DM me here and I'll apologize personally. Angela, you're laughing at me, so you can follow up that question and see if you have any policies there too.
Well, it's interesting to me that, you say people that's not how I think. I mean, I also think like you, where it's like, okay, let's look for a list and grab the top at the list. But my direct manager is not like that. We had a recent situation where we were hiring a firm, and the team that presented to us, global teams, all via Zoom. We had multiple teams present, and when we were done, we were like, their pricing is very similar, what they're offering is very similar, and we had that list. And so it was this one versus this one type of decision. And his point was this one team was a much more diverse group that they shared with us that is going to be handling this matter. And I think that is something that we should take into account. And I didn't notice until he pointed it out. So I said, here I am, the female, and I didn't notice that they didn't have any females on their entire team that presented. So I don't know necessarily that it matters that, if you're a female looking for female. I think it was a good point he made. And with all other things similar, that was the one that drew us to that team. So I think that was important.
Antun, Nakul, any thoughts on this?
Go. That's fine. We don't have a strict diversity policy, meaning I've heard in another association I'm with that some corporations are implementing that in every proposal, for example, from a law firm, you have to have a certain percentage of diverse or inclusive candidate, whether it's 30%, I've heard varying percentages. We don't have anything like that, and I haven't really broached that subject with our law firms, because most of the law firms we have long-term experience with. And then new law firms, it's typically based on area of expertise for us. And I think the issue that we've encountered, or that I've heard other corporations encountered, and that we will likely encounter, is that if you're looking, if you're sort of looking needle in the haystack, if you're looking for a certain area of expertise, and then you're also whittling down, what type of diversity that particular law firm has, it becomes very difficult to combine the two. Not to say it's insurmountable, but it just becomes very difficult. So we haven't really pushed it yet, but I've heard corporate policies being implemented that might happen in the next year or so.
Yeah, so I would say we don't have a strict policy as of yet in terms of how we hire counsel, but we're moving in that direction. And I think, and look, we're being recorded here, so I'll be, I won't get too editorial, but I think, we've got our heart in the right place. We have a diversity and inclusion committee, which I'm the representative from the legal department. These are all things that we're talking about, but we're not really, we're not at the front of the pack on this. There are other, I think, companies and legal departments that are way ahead of us in terms of how they're thinking about this issue. I think a year from now, if we were all to sit down and have this discussion, we'd be in a little bit of a different place. We'd have probably some more policies laid out. And I think we do want to get to the point where diversity, inclusion, the teams that we're hiring, what those teams look like, that diversity is taken into account in a serious way. I think that is a priority that, as best I can tell, has been identified by the company, not just in legal, but in other parts of the company. That's a policy that I support. And we'll see how long it takes to play out. But I think there's some good role models out there. I mean, there's other companies that have, I think, put some really good thinking into this that we'll look to see how they've done it and some of their successes and failures. But it's something we're looking to move through. And that's tied to, I think I mentioned that we had a diversity and inclusion committee. You see a lot of companies these days moving to where they have a specific person, usually an executive, that's solely dedicated to diversity and inclusion. I'm sure there's companies, in-house lawyers at companies that have that, and which is something else that we're looking at, because I think at the end of the day, if you don't have someone that's dedicated to it, if you don't have a name and a title, and some influence in the company, and then you're just not going to be able to move the ball very far in terms of diversity and inclusion. So I'm hopeful that we move, to a point where that's a serious priority for us. It looks like we're headed in that direction, but we just don't have a specific policy, especially in the legal department yet.
I do think one of the elements of inclusion, and as we specifically said, this is diversity and inclusion. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about making sure that we are creating an environment that people feel included. And I do think that one of the interesting parts about working from home has been when you're in the office environment, we're all suits, we're all cookie cutter, fitting that corporate look. But when you're working from home, when I'm working from home and 3:35 rolls around and a 6-year-old and 9-year-old and a 10-year-old comes screaming through the door and all heck breaks loose on the other side of this wall, there's no hiding that, right? And if I'm on a call, I'm on a call, and it doesn't matter who I'm on the call with. I can say, I'm sorry, that's my kids. They just got home from school. And those are the things that kind of break down some of that cookie cutter that, you hear dogs barking in the background. Like, these are all things that I think do get lost a little bit in just remembering that people are people. And, I think that's one of the benefits of working from home is the baby steps towards inclusion is making sure that everybody, even the moms having the dads with kids and run around and just having families, I think is one of those initial steps that I think it's going to, when we do go back into the office, people are going to, that's that baby step, which I'm hoping is going to kind of snowball as things go on. So one of the other things that we found is that now that everybody's working from home, working remotely, I should say, this sort of gives us the opportunity to broaden the candidate pool. As our GC said, if we now have a guy sitting in Mexico and nobody is in the office here, then why do we need to limit our search to somebody who either lives in the Detroit area or is willing to move to the Detroit area within the next month, when we could just hire somebody from Atlanta and just have them stay in Atlanta until indefinitely, right? Fly in twice a year for some meetings and that sort of thing. How has your candidate pool opened up during because of COVID? Has this had any effect on it whatsoever? And this should hopefully have a positive influence on diversity inclusion by opening the pool of candidates. Eeny, meeny, miny, Antun.
We talked about this actually. Yeah, I just talked about this last week because we were looking to hire someone new. And then the question was, do we want someone in the office or not? And that goes back to your question 5 questions ago. Are we going back to the office or not? So it's nice now that we're all working remotely, but then if we're required to go back to the office, what happens then? So I erred on the side of caution and said, let's keep someone in the Detroit area because that's where the position, if we were to have a physical location, that's where it would be. So that's what I've erred on the side of caution to do that. But ideally, it would be exactly what you said, that if you're looking to hire new people in the future, that it's open to anyone and wherever they want to live, which is also means that potentially you retain people because people want to move. They have circumstances where they want to go someplace else. They want to move. They want to go to somewhere closer to their family or wherever their hometown is. And you can keep them on, especially when you have experience. In fact, I would say it's even better for retention than it is for hiring someone new, because the other conversation that we had last week was, if you're hiring someone new, same as meeting someone virtually like this, it's a little bit difficult to train them, to get to know them, to make sure they know your systems, your processes, how you work, how you interact. It's more difficult virtually than it is in person. Whereas with someone that you've worked with for a number of years and they say, I want to move to Colorado or California for whatever reason, you work with them, they know how you work, you know how they work. It shouldn't be a barrier anymore.
Yeah, John, I'll say we are now kind of open. We're obviously just coming, out of this whole crucible of the pandemic and what it's done, quite frankly, to our business. But we are now looking to hire on the team, and we have specifically said that we're willing to consider remote candidates. So I think the thinking there is that we're probably not going to return to the office anytime soon. When we do, it's going to be in a hybrid format. And so there might be some flexibility that's offered to everyone. So then why limit the pool? And again, I mentioned our corporate office is in the Philadelphia area. I'm obviously here in Atlanta. We have other lawyers that even pre-pandemic were in different parts of the country. And I think this is now I think the lesson here is that we can make this work. We're still pretty effective. And if there's some talent, there's a candidate that lives outside of Philadelphia, Atlanta or Dallas, or wherever the case may be, we want to be open to looking and exploring that candidate and potentially hiring.
So for us, we brought someone new on staff, and they lived out of state, and the position was determined to be a move to Detroit position. But now that person has been hired, they've indicated there's no need to move. So the person who has a house and would have had to otherwise sell their home and move to the Detroit area to find a new one, they are not now, because it's unclear if they even ever are going to need to. And so this has been a really important question for us too. Does this grow our diversity? Does this allow us to be more diverse in our candidate pool? I know working at the patent office, it was interesting to me. I worked at a law firm, and there was definitely a group of people, it was kind of uniform. And the concern was it was hard to get diverse candidates because this was the people that were attending law school in this area and engineering and going into law school. But when I was at the patent office, they were taking from all over the United States, and it was a very, very diverse group. And so it was interesting to me because of the ability to be flexible with where you're pulling people from, that you were able to make changes. It wasn't necessarily all the same. So I think it definitely adds to the ability to have a diverse group of people, candidates.
Yeah, so I think the last my thought on that is whoever's putting the business cases together, just think about what the cost of a moving package is versus the cost of 2 tickets. Fly them in the summer, fly them in for the Christmas party. You can pay for a lot of airline tickets with the cost of all that moving, the cost of paying for the moving. So looking at the clock, we're at 6:01, which I went to University of Michigan, and all classes start 5 minutes after, so I always run late. But we really should wrap this up. So I want to thank Angela, Antun, and Nakul for being on the panel today. I will give you guys the opportunity here. If there's any questions that I did not ask you that you were begging, hoping, and dying that you would be asked this question, feel free to chime in. I'm not saying it's snowing. Holy crap. Sorry. I'm working from home, got a window right here. It is full blown blizzard outside right now with blue sky, craziest thing. So anyway, if anybody has any questions that they're dying to ask and answer of themselves, otherwise I'm done.
Good here on my end.
Good here.
Good here.
Well, great. Everyone on the panel, thank you so much for your participation. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin just for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Matt. I think the program was great. I think, we have proven what we've talked about in this panel, that you don't have to be next door. You could be next door on the Brady Bunch screen. And I think this worked great. I really want to thank Matt for helping manage that the pre-program social interaction, because I think those were really good. I don't know if there were 10 or 15 or 18 minutes of good discussion. I think no one was a wallflower, that everyone was welcoming to each other, and we met each other. And I think that really worked nicely. And I thought these were good, solid, substantive engagement Q&A. And I think that's good, because in one of the social hour discussions, we talked about, hey, what kind of programs do you do? And the Atlanta group talked about how we do some entertaining skits, and the Michigan group said we do more panels, and kind of the overlap there. But I think this was really solid reminders about, hey, this is what it's like being inside. If you were outside counsel before, what was it like? And how you think about when you're dealing with people. And John's point about, hey, I got my kids piling in at 3 o'clock. I was on the call yesterday where our pandemic puppy started howling. I said, look, I can't pretend like there's not a dog howling in the back. And, that's how we're living. And I think we're seeing each other as real people. And I think that's good because, quite frankly, lawyers have a reputation, perhaps earned, for being jerkier than the average bear. And giving this opportunity to see each other as real people, I think, improves our collegiality and our civility in our practice and our personal lives. And I think also branches into our diversity, equity, and inclusion, and diversity, inclusion, and belonging, which is a part of all the ends as well as the American ends nationally. So maybe Matt is sad, or maybe others are sad that he gave me a moment of closing, but I really do thank everyone for putting this project together. And I see an opening to have more, inter and intrastate opportunities. So thank you to all of y'all for the panel and for the program.